Welcome to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is a shared community space for grassroots and small nonprofit organizations working to make lives better for everyone in Waterloo region. Partner organizations come from a range of fields: environmental justice, democratic reform, arts and culture, anti-poverty, anti-racism, human rights, ethno-cultural and newcomer support, technology, peace and nonviolence, spirituality, and well-being. On the show, we welcome one of our partners to the Civic Hub.
About fair voting. What is it about voting that could be fair or not?
Well, right now we are stuck in that first past the post promise that was supposed to be taken away by Mr. Trudeau a few years back, and he never actually accomplished it, and came out with questionnaires and all kinds of excuses on why he didn't do what he was going to do, which was to end first past the post and allow us to have an opportunity at changing or putting through electoral reform. And we wanted to stand up for proportional representation, which means that every vote counts, regardless of whether your party won or not. And right now, we're still stuck with the first past the post, and we're gonna fight it and never give up on that.
Can you tell me what first past the post does to make elections unfair?
Well, it becomes what we refer to as a fake majority. And when you turn around and you see the way that we voted versus the way in which the seats are laid out in the House of Commons, it just didn't work. It's not mathematically true to the people's vote. 47% in the one of the last federal election results was for the Liberals, and they were going to sit in a minority and have a real problem until the NDP stood up and said, "Hey, we'll help you," in a friendly partnership. And we got they only got 32% of the popular vote, but they got 47% of the seats.
Yeah.
And again, we look at our provincial situation, and they pulled off with some odd numbers that really didn't make sense to the voters at 41% of the popular vote, but they got 67% of the seats,
right,
which is a false majority. So we're going to keep on fighting for that.
It's even worse for the smaller parties, isn't it? Parties that get 5, 6, 7% of the vote end up with maybe 1, 2, or 0 seats.
Well, exactly. Like if our whole way in which we look at it, if you get 25% of the popular vote in the federal election, you should have close to 25% of the seats in the House of Commons. Mm-hmm. That's what that's what the House of Commons is. And we see that the House of Commoners, has almost turned into the House of Corporations, with big oil and pharma and the banks. 8,000 lobbyists trucking around between federal and provincial governments putting demands on our MPs, which isn't what the people wanted. It's what the parties want, right, and what the corporations are demanding from us.
And this is exacerbated by the first past the post way of electing the candidates, electing the representatives.
Yeah, it's a seat that makes the difference. It's not the voters' voters' power. So we want to bring that back, so that, well, when you vote and you don't vote for the winning party, we think your vote is wasted.
Yeah.
So in other words, you vote for the Green Party of Canada, and if Kitchener-Waterloo got lucky, and our Kitchener got lucky, Kitchener Centre, got lucky and brought in Mike Morris. But other places around the country that voted Green, your vote went to the garbage can. It's just a piece of statistical data that the party can use going, well, we did better than we did last time, or we kind of fell off the boat.
Right.
So we want to make it so that each one of those votes will count towards the national total. Sorry.
And what's the solution? How can we fix that?
Well, when we bring in proportional representation, when we bring it in, that's the dream come true. Each one of these votes will go to the national count. And when you turn around and say each seat in the House of Commons be worth a certain amount of votes. Mm-hmm. And those certain amount of votes, if your party achieves that times 5, then you should have 5 seats in the House of Commons representing your party, representing your values. And when you don't, and people lose seats by very small margins, but their votes don't count, all the votes that they receive. So we want to bring those in so every one of them is going to mean something towards running the government of Canada, running the government of Ontario.
Yeah. You see that locally in the individual ridings as well, don't you? Because in my riding, Kitchener-Conestoga, I didn't vote for the Conservative candidate, who only got about 40% of the votes, which means that 60% of the voters voted against him, and yet he's in power anyway. So
yeah, and there you go again with the whole perspective of, I got the most votes, but I didn't get 50 plus 1. Now there's a little bit of a subject to look at. Is in the House of Commons, you have to have 50% plus 1 to get legislation through.
That's the number of seats.
That's the number of seats. So you have to work on that. You also, heck, mom and dad and the kids decide through 50 plus 1 on where they go for holidays.
Yeah.
If there's 4 kids in the family and 2 parents, they got to decide on where they're going for holidays. They don't go by first, like mom and dad get the decision and nobody else.
Yeah.
That's a little off, but it's the whole thing is we want to be proportional to what the people are voting for.
Right. And Fair Vote Canada and the Waterloo Region chapter of that is working to achieve proportional representation, both federally and provincially.
Well, that's what our main goal is, to get that proportional representation. And we know it takes baby steps to get there. So one of the big things that happened last year, our voice was really heard in the House of Commons when we turned around with our friendly members of the House of Commons and put a motion M86 together, which brought a vote to the House of Commons for a citizens' assembly on electoral reform. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even mandatory legislation. It was just a group of, we hope, nonpartisan citizens to listen to all the different forms of electoral process and see how we can make Canada better. And funny enough, with his promise of ending first past the post, all the members who voted for this process of the Citizens' Assembly were very active for it, but the Prime Minister wouldn't accept that question.
Yeah.
And he voted against a Citizens' Assembly on electoral reform, which was just a conversation starter.
And as did a number of other Liberal MPs.
Yeah, but we got a few of them through. Actually, this region didn't do too bad. We got a few, some NDP and some Liberal support. And we actually, I believe, out of the vote, got 3 members of the Conservative Party, which was a real shocker.
It's a pleasant shock, though.
It was a very pleasant shock. 101 was our vote for, but 220 against. So we missed it by a bit, but that's only the first 10. That's our first chance of having our voice heard. We're going to come back again. I don't know when, but we'll organize it and come back again, Adam.
Right. What other lobbying efforts is Fair Vote Canada and Fair Vote Waterloo making?
Well, there's a really good one that's going on right now, and it's up in the Yukon. The Prime Minister gave the Yukon the right to assemble their own government, their own electoral system. And we're hoping that Fair Vote can be part of that. Now, it's a citizens' assembly in the Yukon. It's a wonderful opportunity to show how the system works. And we're going to stand there and we are going to back it 100%. We've got people up there, part of Fair Vote Canada in the Yukon, that are working to develop the chance of proportional representation being selected. We can't guarantee it. It's up to the Assembly to bring forward all that information and discuss it with their people and their leaders and decide on how they want to go forward.
Right.
But it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, so hopefully this Citizens Assembly will be able to produce some binding recommendations that the government then will have to act on.
Well, we're just really hoping it's not going to be first past the post. But it's up to them to decide.
Yeah.
So, like, we're completely nonpartisan. We are not tied to any political party, whether it's federal or provincial. We just want to be the voice of the people. And right now that voice is being nullified by the corporate interests, by the lobbyists, and everybody else stepping over top of us and into the hallways of the House of Commons and the hallways of the legislatures. And we don't think that's right, that we're losing our voice.
Right. So in the past, citizens' assemblies have always come out in favor of some kind of proportional representation. I don't think a citizens' assembly has ever chosen first past the post as the recommended way of going forward.
No, because there's no real value to the citizen. It's a system in which let's say the Conservative and the Liberals are very comfortable with. They have their seesaw situation where the Conservatives are in power. They strip away a lot of things to balance the budget, which is one of their fundamental principles. And then the Liberals come in with a bunch of social programs and different things that, increase the budget. And then they seem to go back and forth. And the guy in the middle doesn't seem to get anything really of value to hold on to. It's just constantly going back and forth.
So all the legislative time is spent doing and undoing the legislation from the previous parliament.
And that can cost millions and millions of dollars. Right. If you look at right now what we're fighting, what the government of Ontario is in a fight with to move the beer and the wine into the corner stores, but it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do it a year early when it was going to happen anyway. So there's some sort of reason for it, but you're not going to hear them come out and go, well, we think what's going to happen in the future for the federal government is going to really, mess things up. So we try to move early. There's so much that we don't understand, so much the Canadian voter needs to understand that we want to fight for them. We want their vote, no matter what, to count going forward.
Right. So you say you want their votes to count. Now, I figured all votes are counted.
Correct. Yep, they are definitely counted, and a lot of them wind up on the cutting floor if you're not the winning party. So we want that to transpire into those votes go to the national count or the provincial count for that party, and then the members of Parliament are selected, or the members of the legislation are selected from that overall volume of votes.
Okay.
So if it's, like I said before, if it's 15% of the popular vote that you got, you should have a close to 15% representation in the House of Commons.
So in my case, where I was one of the 60% of the voters that voted for the non-winning candidate, my vote really got discarded because I didn't get my representation in my area.
Right. It did not count towards something positive in the House or in the legislation.
And under a proportional system, my vote would have gone towards electing a candidate, not necessarily a candidate in the majority, but counted towards...
And not necessarily a candidate that is in your riding, but a candidate nonetheless in a seat that represents that party and hopefully your values as well. Now, one of the other things that we're trying to fight going forward is our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's been going on for many years. I believe you mentioned it was 2012 or something like that.
I've heard of court cases claiming that the Charter of Rights guarantees fair representation in government. And so that this is having first past the post is a violation of that principle.
Well, yeah, there's two portions of it, Section 3 and Section 15, that they're going back with another crack at it after losing the first round. They're going to go back and see if we can, put our words together a little better and get this to be something of importance, that the first past the post goes against some of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
So is this an appeal to a previous case?
Well, it's an appeal of the same case. I believe it is anyway.
Okay.
That we have to have our voice heard and have it worth every single. Like you come up after work and you put that X on your ballot and you put the ballot and you hope that it does something. But if it doesn't, we end up with, well, let's say the vote count nowadays of people coming out has dropped dramatically.
Right.
So there's much less interest in going out to vote because you don't think your vote's going to count because you don't think your candidate's going to win. So why should you bother?
And so we see plummeting voter turnout.
Voter turnout plummets. So we've seen in Europe where they've gone through this and they switched over to proportional representation, and their voter turnout went way higher than it has ever been before. They're up into 80% because the people know their voice is going to be heard.
Does that have something to do with mandatory voting as well?
I believe it's Australia has the mandatory vote, and if you don't vote, you get fined or you get like a ticket on your taxes or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
But it's mandatory that you vote. I don't think we need to get to a mandatory vote. I think that's a little bit too, a little too dramatic.
Okay.
I think let's just give us the chance to know that our vote's going to count no matter what and who you vote for. There's some, I know that we looked at the last ballot, even with the provincial, and there was like 18 different groups on that ballot. Now, a lot of them aren't going to be able to achieve that minimum value of votes to get a seat in the House of Commons. But we're going to have a more diverse group, a better voice of the community.
Right. Instead of having just a single voice in a single riding, we have multiple candidates across the spectrum of what the voters have asked for.
Absolutely. I think the big three are going to be in for a shakeup if we can get this going forward. Now, we could also go with a citizens' assembly on electoral reform provincially.
Yeah.
It just it doesn't have to be just federally. So
we had that in 2007, and it was so poorly advertised and so poorly promoted by the provincial government, who of course have a vested interest in keeping first past the post because it gives them regular majorities. But the turnout for the referendum vote on should we change the voting system was badly done and was denied in the votes.
That's one of the things we don't really want to get into is a referendum.
Yeah.
Because that can be a whole lot of money thrown into that with advertising. And, well, the special interest groups that have the power of the government in their hand do not want to change the electoral system because the citizens aren't happy with it. They want to hold on to what they got. And that's a fight.
Yeah. So what has Fair Vote Waterloo been doing to engage in this fight?
Well, we're trying very hard to build back the Waterloo chapter. As we all are aware that a lot of the civic groups took a real beating after that pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was up in power. Everybody was marching and having their get-togethers. And all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And we all wound up in Zoom world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that same feeling of shaking hands and, talking to people face to face and having that conversation which needs to be, but you got it in the Zoom world. And I imagine people just got tired of it and had other things to worry about because here we are, people losing jobs, people having difficulty paying bills. So contributing to Fair Vote, which is a wonderful thing that we need to have happen. We don't do it for free. Like it's not how we get things done. Yeah. Like it's not it's a nonprofit, but it is a need for funding to be able to move forward with legislation and advertising and opportunities like this on the Civic Hub radio.
Yeah. But all the members of Fair Vote Canada and Fair Vote Waterloo are volunteers. There's I guess the executive director, Anita Nickerson,
right.
is one paid position.
That's the one, I believe that's the only one paid position, and she's never ending on that. I think she's seven, she's
Anita
7
Nickerson,
days.
who happens to be a Kitchener resident as well. So we've
Yes,
got the
that's-
executive director for the entire Canadian Fair Vote in our hometown.
And she puts 100% effort into it, and so does many other people. In our chapter, we want to build it. So what we'd like to do is let you know that we're going to be at the Multicultural Festival on June the 22nd, 23rd. We'll have a table there. We're also going to be at the Victoria Park for a big picnic on the 8th of August, which is where we like to get together with everybody, just to answer the questions. And if you come down as an interested participant, we'll give you all the information that we can to make things work that way. And then
You'll have literature and flyers and,
well-
and little charts and graphs. And
yeah, we can fill your head with numbers, that's for sure. So we want to do that, but we also let everybody know we have a monthly meeting, and it's usually Zoom or through I think it's Jitsi.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, and we try to keep as up to date as we can on, well, civic engagement. And there's all kinds of opportunities within the region that we want to tackle. We want to get to the universities. We got to the high schools last year.
Good.
And I asked the kids a couple of quick questions about the importance of civics, and they went, oh yeah, that's 100%. And all the kids agreed.
Yeah.
But when I asked them about voting at the age of 16, which is one of the things people are interested in, half of them said, no, we're not smart enough. We don't know enough yet. So I was floored by the fact that there's 16-year-olds who don't believe that they're knowledgeable enough to be able to vote.
That's interesting.
So 50-50 on that was quite it's a mind-blowing number when you're out there speaking with these kids.
Yeah. And you said you have monthly meetings. Are you using the Civic Hub as a meeting location?
We use the Civic Hub for our AGM in September, and we use it for a potluck. We all like to sit down and have a good bite to eat and have some fun chatting about maybe things other than just the Fair Vote cause. But we do that in November 14th, I think this year we're scheduled for our potluck.
Okay.
But we're more than welcome, are more than happy to join any social group that wants to get together, whether it's at the markets or whether it's at different festivals. If anybody is interested in having us come out, we'd be more than happy to.
Right. How can people get a hold of the people at Fair Vote Waterloo?
Well, the Fair Vote Waterloo website is available. You can also contact Fair Vote Canada or fairvote.ca, and they can direct you through to our Waterloo chapter. I don't know exactly whose email address or what email address is available for that, but I know fairvote.ca will definitely get you on your road to finding us in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay, we'll dig that out and stick it on the show notes on the Civic Hub website, civichubwr.org, and then you can look it all up from there.
Well, that's good. The Civic Hub is something special. That's really been I know that yourself and Shannon Somerville?
Sharon Somerville was
Sharon's-
a longtime co-chair for Fair Vote Waterloo,
and
as was I, actually. So.
there you go. And well, that's what makes this conversation even more comfortable, and I thank you for
Yeah.
that. But no, to get us involved in that was a gift. They've been gracious. They got a huge facility. We want to pack it. I mean,
Right.
bring in the people. So if anybody's interested, we will put forward the information to them on when we meet next. But it'll be probably our annual general meeting in September.
Okay. And in the meantime, there's a monthly online meetings using either Zoom or Jitsi.
Yep. Yeah, but we're trying very hard to Well, just make it, well, if we need to get back to the hub, we'll sit back and we'll go back and talk to them and organize something for additional time at the hub. But right now, it's mainly board members and a few others that come in to help us. But we got to get back on board,
Right.
pushing it.
I guess the summer festivals, the multicultural festival and the picnic are good ways of gathering additional members.
Yeah, everybody come on back out again. Like the worries are the worries of where things are going are huge.
Yeah.
Like we're about, well, from what people's comments are, we're getting close to another false majority in the next federal election. Whether or not they achieve over 50% of the vote of Canadians or not, we could have, a conservative majority, a false majority.
Right.
And not to say that this Liberal one isn't a false majority because of the cooperation with the NDP, but that's how proportional representation works. It's cooperation through all of the different parties to build strong legislation going forward.
And you see that in most other countries that have proportional representation, they don't have this policy lurch where one party undoes the work from another party time and time again. It takes longer for them to craft the legislation because there's so much more cooperation with so many more parties that's required. But the legislation that they do craft lasts a very good time and is very responsive to the needs of the people.
Well, right now, there's the reason why there's two sword lengths apart between the opposition and the government, because they are throwing fireballs at each other and stuck on axe to tax and stuck on, people are getting more money for this than they did before, and we're all these other programs. And it's the same fireball. I watch it quite often, the House of Commons, and they're just throwing the same fireballs at each other constantly.
Yeah.
It's not achieving anything. It's not moving forward. And I think that we need to get to a proportional representation or a change in the voting system to show a little more diversity and a little more character that deserves to be in the House of Commons.
It seems to me that one of the best ways for the current Liberal government to stay with a degree of power in the government is to enact proportional representation, because if proportional representation were to happen, it is very likely that they'll have at the very least a minority position in the ruling government forever. Whereas with first past the post, it looks like they're going to lose very, very badly in the upcoming election with this false majority, the majority of the seats going to the Conservatives, even if they don't get the majority of the number of votes.
Well, there's even that additional rezoning going on up north that's going to change the outcome of how many seats are available. And we know that up in the north area, it's very conservative. And we're not against the Conservatives, not against the Liberals or anybody, but we just want to make sure that it's going to turn out proportionally, that that's the vote of the people. And we're not there, and that's really, really annoying.
Right. It's something that redistricting happens at every 10 years or so, and it always seems to me that it seems to be in favor of one party or another, even though the redistricting commission is allegedly nonpartisan as well.
Right. Well, just to let the listeners know, if you go to fairvote.ca, you can sign up for something called PR 101, and it's a group that gets together to discuss the basic principles of proportional representation. Now, there's an awful lot to it. There's an awful lot to learn going forward, but you just got to trust that we're trying to make the best we can out of your vote, make it as powerful as possible, because right now, people are accepting the promises, but they're not getting the results. So we want to show you how we're going to look going forward to fix that, to make it more, proportional to the people.
Right. So, John Charlton from Fair Vote Waterloo, thank you very much for coming into the studio and talking about...
Did that ever go fast?
It does, doesn't it?
Well, we'd love to come back again when we have some maybe updated information on how things are getting better. But again, to the Civic Hub and to the radio station, CKMS, we thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you, John, and welcome to the Civic Hub. You've been listening to Welcome to the Civic Hub, where we welcome community partners to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is online at civichubwr.org. You can reach the Civic Hub by email at civichub@waterlooregion.org. Welcome to the Civic Hub is produced at the studio of CKMS Radio Waterloo. The show is sponsored by the Social Development Center. The executive producer is Alexander Petrovich. Ritika Sharmali is the producer and host, and I'm Bob Jonkman. Civic Hub is supported by the Region of Waterloo Upstream Fund. The theme music is A Good Bass by Kumiko from the Free Music Archive.